Good morning, all. It's my pleasure to declare open the proceedings and this open ceremony, and to give the floor to Mrs. Roberta Metsola, President of the European Parliament, that will address the Assembly with a video. I want to remember that the President of the Parliament, Roberta Metsola, is today in Kiev, in the capital of Ukraine. It's the first responsible of an European institution that visits on site Kiev. But now she's with us in a personal message. The floor, please, to the President of the Parliament European, Roberta Metsola.
Madame la Maire, Your Excellencies, co-presidents, colleagues, I welcome you warmly to the European Parliament in Strasbourg on this first day of the 41st Joint ACP-EU Parliamentary Assembly. For many years now, our ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly has been meeting to discuss our partnership, our cooperation with one another, and our solidarity with one another. The prime feature of this assembly is that it is a joint assembly and a parliamentary assembly, whereby African, Caribbean, Pacific countries, on par with European countries, jointly express a commitment to uphold shared values of parliamentary democracy and respect for human rights. The nature of joint ACP-EU Parliamentary Assembly relations is one of friendship, mutual respect, and a long-lasting one too. Today we meet as partners in democracy, unfortunately against a backdrop of war raging less than 2,000 kilometers away from us in Strasbourg. The European Parliament condemns the Russian criminal invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. Putin's attack on Ukraine is part of the Kremlin's agenda to destabilize the rule-based world order. It is a path that we will not allow him to walk unchallenged. No economic or stately power can be permitted to behave as a predator. And I am glad that we stand together in opposing aggressive powers that seek to use force and to intimidate. Ukraine, a sovereign, democratic European state, has been brutally attacked by Putin's army. The human tragedy is enormous, with thousands dead and even more casualties. Homes, schools and hospitals have not been spared by Russian war crimes. 3.6 million Ukrainians have fled the hostilities to seek protection in neighboring countries. But this horrendous war will not only have a human toll. Ukraine is a major world producer and exporter of foodstuffs, such as wheat, corn and sunflower oil. With Russian tanks destroying logistics and supply chains for Ukrainian farmers, the effect on food production, prices and availability will unfortunately be felt far and wide. In coming months, many countries around the globe may experience both food shortages and inflation in the cost of everyday products. Half of the African wheat imports, for example, come from Ukraine or Russia. The heavy economic and social consequences of this war come on top of the existing challenges following the COVID pandemic and will particularly impact developing countries. This is why last week at the European Parliament, we adopted a resolution on the urgent need for an EU action plan to ensure food security inside and outside the EU in light of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We are well aware of the risk of an extremely serious global food crisis. To counter this, we must work as partners to beef up the resilience of our societies. This needs to be a central and fundamental aspect of our future cooperation. This Sunday will mark 20 years since the Cotonou Partnership Agreement. Our discussions over the coming 3 days are an opportunity for us to take stock of the solid progress of our bilateral relations over the years and to reflect on how we can build a common future and work together as partners to tackle the challenges ahead. Speaking of the future, I am particularly pleased to see that we will also have 3 young speakers from the African, Caribbean and Pacific regions with us that will address the Assembly during these days. We are all eager to get our new ACP-EU Partnership Agreement signed and implemented, to put words into action for our countries and for our citizens. Based on shared values of protecting human rights, democracy and good governance, this new agreement will tighten relations between ACP countries and European Union further. It will allow us to continue to play a fundamental role in the multilateral global system, to advance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, to promote peace, security and prosperity, all while seeking to combat poverty and inequalities. As President of the European Parliament, what for me is the most important part of the new agreement is the essential role that will be played by you, parliamentarians, the directly elected representatives of our citizens. The Joint Assembly will continue its work, but we will also have 3 regional parliamentary assemblies, one for Africa, one for the Caribbean, and one for the Pacific, that will strengthen parliamentary scrutiny, an essential part of the democratic role as elected representatives. And I am proud that this was achieved during negotiations, because a government-only partnership would not fully represent the interests of people from African, Caribbean, Pacific and European countries. Going forward, I hope that the new agreement will be signed without delay by all parties, so that next time we can meet under the new rules. Until then, I wish you all fruitful onward discussions here in Strasbourg. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. The President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. Good luck for your mission today in Kiev. And it's my pleasure now to give the floor to Mr. Clement Beaune, Minister of State for European Affairs from the French government and from the Presidency. And he addresses and formally opens the Joint Parliamentary Assembly remotely. Please, Mr. Clement Beaune.
Merci beaucoup, honorable co-président.
Thank you very much, co-president of the EU ACP Joint Parliamentary Assembly, Secretary General, members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Madam Mayor of Strasbourg. I'm very pleased and honoured to be able to speak before you this morning on the occasion of this opening of the 41st session of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly between the African, Caribbean and Pacific states and the European Union. Unfortunately, I can't be with you this morning because I am I'm currently otherwise occupied, but I'm very pleased that you've been able to come to Strasbourg, which is a beautiful city in the springtime. It's a capital of Europe, and it's an honor for you to receive you here. The hemicycle in Strasbourg is the democratic heart of the European Union. It is part of the heart of the European miracle, in which generations of Europeans have worked together to create a common political culture in mutual respect for their differences and diversity. The 41st session of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly is an important one from a number of reasons, as Mrs. Metsola has recalled. This is a critical moment in our history. Democratic values, which you all represent, are currently under attack, an unprecedented attack, with the war of aggression launched by the Russian Federation against the Ukraine. This war is going to change the progress of the world. We are closely attached to sovereignty and democracy, and we are attached also to the principles of international law, the principles of dialogue and diplomacy. So that we hope that we'll be able to use these principles to put an end to this conflict and bring the countries back to peace. And let's hope that with the ACP and the EU, we're all on the same page. However, we risk an economic, an energy crisis. We have just gone through the COVID pandemic, and it's the right moment for us to be united and show a spirit of international cooperation. The priority has to be ensure security of supply and to ensure that we have agricultural supplies that are both sustainable but produce food in sufficient quantities. We need to ensure supply of agricultural commodities and the inputs required to grow them. We need to ensure that there is sufficient nutrition, sufficient food in the most vulnerable countries. That is why there is an FAO initiative for food security, which President Macron is sponsoring. This is an important moment because it allows us to work together to deal with this crisis. We're seeing disorder around the world at the moment, but at moments like this, it's important that democratic institutions such as ourselves should enter into dialogue, following our ideals of peace and democracy. The 41st session of your assembly is taking place in difficult circumstances. We've gone through a pandemic, and the war in Ukraine has shaken all of our certainties. It has painfully recalled to us our vulnerabilities. It has shown how fragile our health systems are in particular. But what we have seen is that our democracies and our political systems can only work in a spirit of solidarity and cooperation. I think that we have shown the strength of our partnership despite all of the difficulties. Solidarity has to be the key to the European response, and it has been throughout the pandemic. If you look at world public health, we have been trying to follow this team spirit in Europe and working together with you through the financing of the COVAX initiative. Europe remains the first financer of the COVAX system around the world. So by mid-2022, we should have managed to roll out fully the vaccines across the world. And it's a question of global public health. The European Union is determined to work together with the ACP countries to ensure that we can create an international agreement to prevent, to deal with and respond to pandemics at the world level. This multilateral approach is innovative and is carried out through the WHO, and that is essential. The session that we are opening today is a critical moment for the planet. I'll remind you of the latest report on from the IPCC. The climate crisis does not disappear just because we are busy dealing with other crises. This will persist. We need to ensure that we create a more sustainable, more just, greener development. This is an imperious necessity. The climate crisis is particularly going to be affecting countries in the global south. We need to ensure that growth is fair, sustainable, and more inclusive. Europe's cooperation around the world through the NDICI initiative in particular should be done together with our partners, particularly the ACP partners. The financial support provided by the European Union is focused on climate action, which will be 20% of the funding. 150 billion euros is being invested, and that is an unprecedented initiative to try and accelerate development in a more sustainable manner. These are important levers if we are to respond to the climate crisis. Common efforts between the ACP and the EU have been important so far, creating a dynamic over the course of the last year, building up towards the Glasgow COP. We're now moving forward to the COP27, whereas commitments that were taken now have to be fully implemented. Another reason why this 41st session of the ACP-EU JPA seems so essential is that it's an important moment for us to reaffirm our partnership. Now that we're moving on from the Cotonou Agreement towards a modernization of our partnership, we are refounding our bilateral relations and collective relations. It's important that we have a wide-ranging comprehensive form of cooperation to deal with the challenges of today and tomorrow. The new agreement shows just how important peace and security and respect for human rights and the principles of democracy and good governance, together with fair trade and human development for protection of the environment and biodiversity, are all key. We have to respond specifically to the needs of all of the different ACP regions, of course. This agreement covers half of the members of the United Nations General Assembly, and it should be an attempt for us to assert our views in the large multilateral assemblies. We also need to bolster the parliamentary dimension of our partnership. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Assembly for the huge amount of work that has gone into preparing the parliamentary dimension. The rapid finalization of the post-Cotonou agreement is going to be a priority for all of us. The NDICI instrument also supports our joint partnership and should allow us to contribute to the international objectives that we have signed up to in terms of sustainable development, the implementation of the Paris Treaty. We need to ensure that this remains an inclusive process together with our partners. I'd like to stress the partnership projects carried out in close cooperation with local authorities on the ground. There are 150 different initiatives that are currently being prepared, which should help to work together and using European financial institutions such as the European Investment Bank and also national development agencies. We need to ensure that the conditions are in place for a successful, mutually beneficial cooperation. And I want to focus in on the subject that will mostly be occupying this 41st session. We know that the next few days will be key for the next for the future of our partnership. This is a unique partnership that represents 1.5 billion people. In terms of understanding among peoples and an institution in which a lot of hopes are invested, I'm sure that you will live up to the high expectations. And I'm sure that you will respond with concrete measures which we will all be committed to. I'd like to thank you for your attention and wish you the best of luck in your work.
Merci, Monsieur Ministre Clément Beaune, Ministre d'État pour les Affaires.
Thank you, Clément Beaune, Minister of State for European Affairs.
Et j'irai maintenant faire ma propre présentation. Je vais passer pour le...
Now I will speak in Portuguese on my own behalf, so it's maybe the moment to put your headphones on if you don't understand Portuguese.
Senhor Ministro de Estado,
Mr. Minister, Mr. Bohm, Mayor of Strasbourg, Jean Bazagyan, Secretary General of the ACP Joint Assembly, Mr. Chicotti, Mr. Co-President, Peter Kenny-Lorea, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tremendous pleasure for me once again to be able to meet with you face to face in this hemicycle for the for the plenary in Strasbourg, and not simply see you through a computer screen. The COVID-19 pandemic gave rise to huge problems and suffering to people throughout the world. And from a slightly less serious perspective, it was also a very difficult period for our ACP-EU Joint Assembly. But we worked extremely hard, and I'm proud of the work which we did, because we managed to keep the Joint Assembly going, but not just keep it going, we managed to keep it active. We managed to keep it achieving things. In 2020, we had a remote meeting of the committees, and we did hold a plenary session in December of that year. Also, we held a youth conference. In 2021, we met once again in a remote meeting in March. The Joint Specialist Committees met again, and in June of that year, we held a plenary session which was split into two parts, because, of course, the size of the fact that we go from Europe to the Pacific gives rise to time zone problems, so we had to split it. And we also managed to hear from the Council and the European Commission. The main focus of our work was, of course, the battle against the pandemic and how to deal with its social, health and economic consequences, which were most serious. Also, in 2021 we had two women's fora and a youth conference where we looked at crucial issues such as gender-based violence, global Europe financial instruments, and the impact of the pandemic on the youngest among us. Finally, but last but not least, we made a substantial contribution to the negotiations on the post-Cotonou Agreement, which have been recently concluded, and stressed successfully the need for a more powerful parliamentary component in the institutional framework. And we managed to get it ratified as an urgent matter and have it come into force. And we noted the optimistic words that the Minister, Clement Boum, has just uttered. In the future, our work as a joint assembly will, of course, continue, and we still have 3 new regional parliamentary assemblies to hold, which will allow a more powerful regional component to our work. The Bureau of the Joint Assembly has, of course, been working extremely hard over the last 12 months to prepare for this transition, cooperating in an imaginative way so as to come up with new rules of procedure for these assemblies to make them more effective and as efficient as possible. The results of this work will be submitted and discussed during this 41st session. When the post-Cotonou Agreement is signed, we will be ready to spring into action immediately and implement its parliamentary dimension fully. Basically, I think, therefore, we've done a great deal and achieved a lot over the last couple of years. I'd like to thank all of you who've contributed to that success. We've worked, of course, under the circumstances forced upon us by the pandemic, but nevertheless, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you to our first face-to-face meeting for the first one we've had in about 2.5 years. It's very nice, as I said before, to be able to see you all in person in the beautiful and historic city of Strasbourg. And please allow me, my friends, to thank the French presidency and the city of Strasbourg and the Grand Est region for the significant support they've given us as we prepared and hold our assembly. In French, Madame Maire, I want to thank you most sincerely for your support, which allowed us to organise our plenary session under excellent conditions. It's not the best weather, but that's not your fault, of course. And let me seize this opportunity to congratulate you for the zero waste target you've set for Strasbourg, as well as what you've been doing for the energy transition, which is something, of course, that's particularly important in this time of war. I'd also like to thank you and congratulate you for the efforts that you and the local authorities in Strasbourg have made to support the people of the Ukraine, those who are there and those who are refugees. Back into Portuguese. Colleagues, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, which is only about 1,000 kilometers from where we are today, didn't simply shake Europe, but the entire world. The Joint Parliamentary Assembly, ACP, is of course based on values such as democracy, the rule of law, human rights, peace, security and prosperity. That's why the Bureau of the ACP-EU Joint Assembly felt we needed to put an urgent debate on the Russian Federation invasion of the Ukraine on the agenda, and so we could discuss its impact on the world. And that debate will be held tomorrow. We can't accept the principle of force winning out over the rule of law. You can't simply invade a sovereign country with no justification. We need to respond, we need to condemn the invasion vehemently, and we need together to assess the impact not just on the Ukraine, but also its impact on all of our countries. Let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen, we're not condemning Russia, the country, or the citizens of Russia. Quite the reverse, in fact. I think we all agree that they deserve a better future, and this is yet another reason why it's vital to condemn the people behind this attack on the sovereignty and self-determination of the people of the Ukraine. The people of Russia deserve to be free. The people of Russia deserve to be prosperous. The people of Russia deserve peace. Peace in the most vital sense of the word. I remember something that Mikhail Gorbachev said when he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. He said, today, peace means things like coexistence and shared creativity between nations. It means moving towards a globalized and universal world and universal civilization. The idea that peace is indivisible is vital, more vital today than ever. Peace isn't unity in similarity, but unity in diversity, and living with and understanding our differences. Peace basically means the absence of violence. It is a moral value. Just think about those wise words. Mr. Gorbachev also said that he, who was of course a Russian, felt about what the aspirations of the Russian people were. And he said, we think that we're part and parcel of modern civilization, sharing humanity's universal values. We want to respect the rules of international law, follow the rules of the game in our economic relations with the rest of the world. We want to share with the rest of the world the burden of responsibility for building a future for our common house. Colleagues, our ambition has to be to do that, and hope that Putin will hear the words of his predecessor, lay down his weapons, order his troops to withdraw, and restore hope, prosperity and freedom to his citizens, things that they deserve so much and long for, so that we can all together work to build the common house and share our future together. A future which has to be sustainable and based on humane and humanitarian values. The invasion of the Ukraine is something which we need, of course, to look at in special detail, but there are other issues on the agenda which are hugely important. There are two other urgent items on the agenda as well. One on threats to stability, sovereignty, and sovereignty in Sahel and Africa, and small island states and their struggle against natural disasters and climate change. The two debates on the agenda will also look at recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, looking at universal health coverage and the world education crisis. These are crucial issues when it comes to ACP-EU cooperation, and it's vital, therefore, that we look at them on our agenda, particularly during the difficult period of world uncertainty which we're living through. Our agenda will also have exchanges of views with the European Commission and the Council. And I want to stress how important our institution regards this interinstitutional cooperation on the agreement between the ACP and the EU. I think it's a great pity, therefore, that it wasn't possible to bring in the conditions to have a normal debate with the Council during this plenary session. The French presidency told us that they weren't going to be able to send a representative to take part in the Council debate tomorrow. We do, of course, have the African, Caribbean and Pacific Countries Council to be represented. So I'd like to thank Minister Temon, who's going to be taking part in that session remotely. Colleagues, I'd also like to take advantage of my chance to address you, to welcome two co-presidents, Mr. Fitz-Jackson, who's from Kingston, Jamaica, and Joseph Okonokono, Yaoundé in Cameroon. Thank you very much for having come to Strasbourg and for being with us We're deeply grateful for your presence, and we look forward to hearing your comments
Celebração dos 20 anos do Acordo de Parceria de Cotonou.
When we celebrate the 20 years of the Cotonou Agreement during this session. It'll also be good to see a former member of the EP and an old friend of the Joint Assembly, Norbert Neuser, in the chamber. Welcome, Norbert. Finally, and as we say in Portugal, and I think in other places, the last shall be first. I'd like to welcome Peter Kenny Lorea Jr., my co-chairman, for the tremendous team spirit which he's shown. It really has been a delight for me to work with you, Peter, and with your team, as it was to work with Joseph O'Connell and Dr. Fomisina. I am looking forward to continuing to work harmoniously with all of you, and I look forward with confidence and a desire to help the people of the 105 countries represented in the Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Help them through the mandate which we have, which was, of course, given to us by them. So, my dear friend Peter Kenny Lorea, Mr. Co-President, Peter, it's a real honour for me to give you the floor now, sir. Thank you very much indeed.
Mr. Clement Bon, Minister of State for European Affairs, attached to the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, Honorable Carlos Zorino, Co-President of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Jean Bossignan, Mayor of the City of Strasbourg, Your Excellency, Mr. Georges Rebelo Pinto Chicotti, Secretary General of the Organization of Africa, Caribbean and Pacific States, distinguished invited guests, fellow parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for the opportunity to make a statement excuse me, at this distinguished gathering. On behalf of the OACPS and on my personal behalf, I wish to thank the government and people of France, in particular the city of Strasbourg, for offering to host these series of meetings of the OACPS Parliamentary Assembly and the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. We acknowledge that in the current climate of COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on international conferences, this was not an easy decision to make. As this is my first address to this August Assembly, I am delighted to finally be among new friends and colleagues. I am equally pleased to see each of you that I have already had the privilege of interacting with on a virtual platform. I wish to thank my region, Pacific region, once again for the confidence vested in my country through me to oversee the affairs of this Assembly. Indeed, I will spare no effort to fulfill the task entrusted to me during this period. I also would like to acknowledge the former co-presidents who are with us, Honourable Jackson, Honourable Connell. In January 2022, in this very room, the Parliament bid farewell to their President. It will be remiss of me not to extend my deepest condolences on my own behalf, and indeed that of the OACP-EU Parliamentary Assembly, on the passing of the President of the European Parliament, the late David Sassoli. We watched the world pay tribute to a man of rare kindness and defender of democracy. I was moved by his decision during the COVID-19 pandemic to open the Parliament for the most vulnerable, particularly women who were victims of domestic violence. Truly a man whose heart for social justice knew no boundaries. May his soul continue to rest in peace. Honourable members, dear colleagues, we are meeting 2 years after what were marked with the greatest isolation and disconnect due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we watched many embrace a new norm of connecting with each other, we also saw at the same time that the world coming together for a common cause and language, the language of humanity and solidarity. Our coming together today truly signifies a testament of the great resilience that communities and peoples possess. This gathering is therefore driven by our common identity of shared global values and ideals. We take pride in the knowledge that our partnership is the largest official and structured organization between the world's developing and developed countries, spanning 3 continents and geographical regions. In coming together, we reaffirm our vision to improve the living standards of our peoples through good governance, preservation of peace and security, and social justice. Co-President, honourable members, before us are matters of profound and far-reaching significance for the OACP-EU. The demand for serious commitment to these matters is inevitable. We are to craft a future that will be meaningful and enriching for the livelihoods of the millions of ordinary people across the space of 3 continents occupied by our 79 member states. The world is facing multiple crises on an unprecedented scale. As never before, however, there is a shared understanding that we can address these challenges by working together, and we who have a popular mandate to represent the people should not be found wanting. For this reason, the Assembly deliberately chose to discuss some topics that are of relevance to all our countries, but of particular interest to the OACP-EU, such as COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on education, as well as the exchange on strengthening our health systems, enhancing the resilience of small island developing states and low-lying coastal countries against climate change and natural disasters. Climate change will affect all our countries if it hasn't done so already. But due to the structural handicap and challenges faced by our OACPS countries and the most vulnerable among our membership, our response to adapt to and mitigate the impacts of climate change could well be insurmountable, if not for the support of our partners. And in this regard, I welcome the announcement by Minister Clement Bon of the support of significant resources, and we look forward to the implementation of this support in our countries, as well as accessing these support for our countries. The OACPS shares the conviction of addressing climate change-related challenges, particularly for the most vulnerable nations, including least developed countries, the landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, who are working together to build resilience, support low carbon transmission, and sustainable development for their countries. Honourable members, distinguished guests, the 41st session of the JPA must truly mark the turning of a new page in the history of the JPA. As we celebrate the 20 years of the Cotonou Partnership Agreement and the future of the OACP-EU Parliamentary Cooperation, we take pride in the Joint Parliamentary Assembly and its many accomplishments stretching over 4 decades. Those who started the Assembly in the early 70s and their successors helped to lay a solid foundation for international political cooperation and multilateralism. Today, the JPA is one of the world's organization of parliaments that facilitates parliamentary diplomacy as well as political debate, dialogue, and cooperation with and between parliaments. It assists our parliaments in coping with a growing international agenda and in developing a parliamentary dimension on global issues, as well as work to advance the OACPS and EU cooperation. So as the curtain closes in on this format of JPA, a new dawn is in the horizon. We look to the future. There is every reason to be optimistic, to be proud of where we are, and confident in our ability to scale new heights in strengthening the parliamentary dimension of this partnership. I am reminded of the words of the former President of South Africa, the late President Nelson Mandela, who once said that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. Many more hills to climb lie ahead for this Assembly. Let us do so with great determination and steadfastness as we continue climbing to these great heights together. Co-President, honourable members, we welcome the new dawn of our Assembly, but we do so with an underlying anxiety. The new agreement was initialed by both parties on the 15th April 2021. The text has undergone legal linguistic revisions submitted by the European side. The date of signature of the new agreement is still subject to internal consultations on the European side. In 2 weeks, it will be a year since the chief negotiators initialed the agreement. I wish to call on this Assembly to use its mandate to call on the EU to fast-track the processes, to pave the way for the signing of the new agreement. In conclusion, I would say that virtually all our countries are currently facing natural, political, or humanitarian challenges of varying degrees. This has demonstrated that, like never before, we need political will, good leadership, effective action, and dynamic change with a sense of urgency. The time has come to construct a multi-dimensional, multi-stakeholder and all-inclusive approach to these global challenges. Let us bring results and delivery through change and improved policies, and create hope and opportunities for people in the 21st century. Only then shall we be on the path to sustainable, inclusive development. May our deliberations and debate collectively rely on our steadfast determination to defend and deepen these values that we cherish and hold so dear: solidarity and unity in diversity. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, my co-president. And now it's time to give the floor. Je vais donner la parole à Jan Bazagian, Mayor.
Let me give the floor to Jan Bazagian, Mayor of Strasbourg. Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
Madame la Présidente du Parlement européen, chère Roberta.
Madam President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, who we heard from remotely before, Mr. Co-President Zorinho and Mr. Co-President Kenny Lorea, Mr. Co-Secretary General, Secretary of State for European Affairs, Timon Bowen, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tremendous pleasure for me to host this crucial issue and meeting crucial for the life of all of us in Europe and our own countries. Welcome to Strasbourg. It's a symbol for Strasbourg, a powerful symbol during the French presidency of the Council of the European Union. Holding this session in Strasbourg, European capital of democracy and human rights, during a painful and difficult period for the European continent, shows how much we need institutions where dialogue and discussion are primary, as in the Joint Parliamentary Assembly between the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries and the European Union. Strasbourg is also the seat of the Council of Europe, the European Court of Human Rights, of course, and it understands the vital importance of these institutions. Strasbourg was an area of reconciliation after World War II, and it is now still an area of peace, dialogue and discussion. Because of its history and its particular position, the city of Strasbourg enjoys close relationships with these institutions which are housed here. Every 2 years, the World Democracy Forum is put together under the aegis of the Council of Europe. It gave the prizes to Václav Havel, granted by the Council of Europe and the European Parliament, as a René Cassin Foundation, an international human rights organisation. So Strasbourg's ambition is an area where people who defend human rights and the oppressed can speak freely, an area where freedom of expression, freedom of thought, just like all fundamental freedoms are constantly in our minds, are protected and fostered. Because Strasbourg is the seat of the European Parliament. We're in Parliament's hemicycle today, so Strasbourg is also an area of democratic and participatory debate. And the area where the Parliament is based is a glassed building, a symbol of transparency and open democracy. Openness and transparency, calling for citizens' participation, are at the heart of what Strasbourg has been doing over the years, and looking forward as it does to the green transition and the promotion of social justice. I was elected in 2020, and with my team I immediately tried to put together a response to an unprecedented health crisis. It's something that our societies have not had to live through for decades. We tried to help out those companies, particularly hotels, restaurants and shops, who had really suffered. We wanted to do something to help them. We wanted to deal with the poverty and precariousness, as well as the domestic violence, which unfortunately grew during the health crisis. We also wanted to provide more money for healthcare and vaccination to allow our citizens to protect themselves, vitally important if we wanted to return to the normal kind of social and economic life. Apart from these urgent topical measures, we also had a municipal plan to try to respond to the three main challenges of the 21st century. The green challenge, the ecological challenge to meet the environmental and climatological problems we had, try to adapt Strasbourg to climate change through ambitious policies, greening the city, trying to decarbonise public transport, and try to produce renewable energies while reducing consumption. The social problems that we needed to respond to, poverty needed to be reduced by affecting jobs, purchasing power, and create systems where people could speak to us easily. There's also the democratic challenge, because we want to build the city of tomorrow with and for the people who live here. I'm aware that these priorities of our job in Strasbourg are in line with the goals that the ACP-EU JPA has set, and the two workshops which are going to be happening this afternoon will show how important this ecological aspect of the city is concerned. You're going to be looking at an area that uses wastewater produced energy and rechannels it for urban heating. You'll see the technological and health aspects as you visit a company which is now present not just throughout Europe but on the African continent as well. So I hope that these innovatory projects, when you see them, will inspire you, will inspire us in turn in the public policies which we implement in our respective countries. So what other links are there between Strasbourg and the ACP countries? Well, Strasbourg's relations with the African continent and its cooperation projects which have derived from this are a significant element of Strasbourg's role on the international stage. Let me just mention a few examples. I've already mentioned one or two. I could talk about Kampala, capital of Uganda. That's part of three key issues: urban agriculture, green urban spaces and education. This partnership, which has only just begun, is happening through a multi-stakeholder link-up and the French Development Agency, which is giving us a great deal of support. Another partnership is one with the economic capital of the Cameroon, Douala. It's in fact the oldest decentralized cooperation Strasbourg has with Africa. It goes back to 1987. The projects underway include a rainwater purification idea and having the idea of Douala, sustainable city, which is benefiting also from ACP support. These exchanges are going to be strengthened in the next few months as we start implementing the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. On the Caribbean, let me mention that Strasbourg has a partnership with Jacmel in Haiti. That's been going on since 1991, and at the moment they're continuing despite the very serious problems Haiti is going through at the moment. It deals with young children, providing support for the kindergartens in Jacmel. It deals with 30 now kindergartens which help children from the ages of 2 to 6. Finally, as was mentioned by other speakers before me, I have to say a few words, and I know this is going to be one of the parts of your programme tomorrow, the war in the Ukraine, following the Russian Federation's invasion. At a time when Europe has to face up to another armed conflict, the meeting of members of the European Parliament with counterparts from the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries is more important than ever. Strasbourg has always been a hospitable city. It's always taken people in, and it is meeting its responsibilities just like other cities in France and Europe, and is investing in receiving displaced persons from Ukraine, and is working internationally through humanitarian, financial and logistical assistance. Ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that your talks here in Strasbourg will help to build a world of peace and solidarity for the people of today, but also for future generations as well. I hope you have a fruitful set of discussions, and I hope that your work will take you to Strasbourg more and more frequently, because you will always be welcome in our city. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And now it is my great pleasure. I'm going to speak Portuguese again. Because, in fact, the next speaker is going to speak English, but he could equally speak Portuguese. Anyway, in Portuguese, let me just briefly introduce and give the floor to Jorge Chicote, Co-Secretary General of the ACP-EU Joint Assembly. My friend Jorge, you have the floor, sir.
Your Excellency, Mr. Clement Bon, Minister of State for European Affairs, Honorable Co-Chairs Carlos Zorrinho and Peter Canelo Rea Jr., Madam Mayor of the City of Strasbourg, Honorable Members of the Joint Parliamentary Assembly, Madam President of the OACP Council of Ministers, representatives of the French Presidency of the European Council, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to address this august body, your 41st session, which may be your last ordinary session under the dispensation of the Cotonou Partnership Agreement. For more than 20 years, this Assembly has carried the very important parliamentary axis of the partnership, which represents the direct voice of our peoples. In your work, you have advocated for a better world, a more equitable world, and one that is fair and just. You have touched the lives of many people, and you have contributed immensely to the eradication of poverty, and you have contributed to sustainable, inclusive development of our countries and regions. Honourable members, by using the attainment of the 2030 Agenda and the implementation of the Paris Agreement as your guiding framework, you have indeed demonstrated in no small measure what it means to leave no one behind. I would like to thank you for that. However, today is not the moment to look back at the past, but rather an opportunity to reflect on the dawn of a new and exciting era in the OACP-EU relationship. The OACP-EU relationship, like any long-standing partnership, has had its ups and downs and continues to change to meet the demands of our constituents and the global environment in which we work. The onus is on us all to continue to work together for the benefit of our citizens. Our partnership has the potential to be the driving force in global politics. Our combined membership accounts for more than half of the seats of the United Nations, and we represent more than 1.5 billion people. Our numeric strength and critical mass need to be deployed in the best interest of our peoples. We need to also demonstrate to the world that we are united and that we are a force to be reckoned with. The new OACP-EU Partnership Agreement provides for that, and the Joint Parliamentary Assembly has an ever important role to ensure that the parties perform and deliver. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia conflict have demonstrated in no uncertain terms how interconnected, interdependent, and interlinked we are. From the east to the west, the south to the north, and indeed between the developing and developed world. The OACP-EU relationship is unique. It is special and an example of meaningful cooperation and understanding. As we enter the new era, it is incumbent on you, honourable members, to contribute to further building this partnership in accordance with the aspirations and, may I say, the dreams of the peoples you represent. Honourable co-chairs, honourable members, let me revert to a matter of key importance to the OACPS. As you know, the new Partnership EU agreement was initialed on the 15th of April 2021 by the chief negotiators at ministerial level of the OACPS and at the commissioner level by the European Union. The OACPS Council of Ministers approved the text, and the parties have agreed that it cannot be amended. However, the OACPS side is concerned about the considerable delay on the EU side to complete the internal processes that would allow for the signing of the agreement. At its 113th session, held virtually On 1st and 2nd of December 2021, the OACP Council of Ministers, while welcoming the extension of transition measures of the Cotonou Agreement from 30th of November 2021 to 30th of June 2022, also called on the European Union to accelerate its internal procedures to enable the expeditious signing of the new agreement. Furthermore, ministers reaffirmed the position of the OACPS that the new agreement will be called the Samoa Agreement, with the expectation that the signing will take place in the capital of the independent state of Samoa, Apia. To this end, I would like to call upon the Assembly to continue to be seized on this matter and ensure that the new era can start very soon. Allow me also to briefly raise two additional matters related to the new agreement. Whilst we understand that the new financial instrument, Global Europe Indice, will bring many advantages to development cooperation, members and regions of the OACPS have faced challenges with its implementation and overall management. I would like to appeal that we be guided by the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectives and the Accra Agenda for Action, and ensure that the principles of a true partnership are strengthened under the new agreement. One of the innovations of the new agreement is that it provides for structured OACP-EU cooperation at the international level, which is without any doubt to the benefit of both parties. Also, at its last session, the Council of Ministers approved the proposed mechanism for international cooperation between the OACPS and the EU. This mechanism aims to enable the implementation of the provisions of Part 3 on global alliances and international cooperation of the new OACPS-EU Partnership Agreement. Such a mechanism was deemed necessary to facilitate the commencement of cooperation at international level without having to wait for the provisional or formal application of the new OACPS agreement. As you know, there are several international events which provide opportunities for collaboration and cooperation, such as the forthcoming UN Oceans Conference, the UN General Assembly, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference COP27, to name but just a few. In this regard, I am optimistic that the EU side will see the advantages of having such a mechanism in place, and one that would allow for the voices of the South to be heard on the international fora. To this end, it is also important that the OACPS-EU GPA be informed on a regular basis of this cooperation. Honourable co-chairs, honourable members, as I mentioned earlier, this event, the events of the past 2 years have clearly indicated the extent to which events in our modern world are interlinked. Partnerships are of primordial importance, and we are happy for our partnership with the European Union. We have a very strong partnership, and parliaments and parliamentarians, you are in the best position to guide us in accordance with the needs, expectations, and aspirations of our peoples. Remain seized, remain vigilant, remain active, and remain steady in your quest to give hope to so many. You have many commitments to continue to work very closely with us. And indeed, this is a true occasion and moment that you have before you today. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the very inspiring speech. I think you give us an idea to begin to book hotels and flights to Apia, to Samoa, as soon as possible. No? So, before to end this opening ceremony, I need to give you some important advices, but first of all, I want to give the floor to Member of the European Parliament, Michael Gallagher, for a point of order. Please, Michael.
Oui, merci, cher co-président. Comme vous le...
Thank you, Co-President. Well, as you'll be aware, our Joint Parliamentary Assembly decided to write an urgent text on the threat to instability in the Sahel and West Africa. Unfortunately, it was not possible to find a date to negotiate a text between the two sides, the ACP and the EU Parliament. A number of efforts have been made to organise this with the Secretariat, and the Parliament was eventually informed that the ACP had not been able to agree their position. So despite all of the efforts made by the Joint Secretariat, there is no written position from the ACP side. Colleagues, you will have received only the text proposed by the European Parliament so far. However, if you want to put together joint amendments together with the ACP side, that would be possible, and we are very ready to do everything possible to ensure that we have a genuinely joint text for the EU Parliament and the ACP. I'm the European Parliament's rapporteur for this text, so I'd propose to all members of the ACP who so wish to meet me at the end of this opening session in room S2.2. So it's just outside. You go across the little bridge. You take the lift, the glass lifts that you'll see, and you should be able to find room S2.2. I propose that we look through the text together. We'll look at the ideas for improving the text so that we can have a genuinely joint text, ACP-EU. I think it would be a bit of a shame if we were ending up having to vote on Sunday on a text that was written only by the parliamentary side. So we'll have this meeting in English and French. There'll be no interpreting because it's an ad hoc informal meeting. I'd like to thank all of those members who've already contributed to this text, particularly Mr. Haider from the Socialists, and I'd also like to express my gratitude to all of the others represented here today for having made the trip to Strasbourg to be here today. So, as I say, after this opening session, we'll meet in the room S2.2. Thank you very much.
Merci, Michael, pour cette invitation.
Thank you, Michael, for that invitation. So, all of the members who want to work on that joint resolution should go and meet in room S2.2 after the end of this opening session. Now, I think it's pretty easy to find the room, but we'll make sure that you find your way.
Other announcements. A family photo will be taken in front of the podium here after the ACP and 10. So I invite all of you in the end of the session to come here to make a family photo. The Parliament restaurant is open for all. Bureau members are invited to a lunch at 13:15, but the restaurant that is in the right side when we go outside this plenary room, it's open for all the members. About the workshops, we have the departure of the bus for the workshop on health is at 2 p.m. in front of the Winston Churchill entrance. You need to follow the links to say WIC. WIC is Winston Churchill entrance. And at 2 p.m. there are buses to this workshop. And the departure of the bus for the workshop on water sanitation will be done in French language. This workshop is at 3:30 in front of in same place, in front of WIC. So good workshops. And now I will suspend the session. We resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. But before leave the room, we will hear the ACP and 10, and after to have a family vote. I invite you to stand to hear the ACP and 10.
ACP